Now that the final withdrawal of US troops has begun, many Afghans in Kabul believe the central government will struggle to prevent the Taliban from sweeping back into power once the last American soldiers leave by September. We wanted to see what Afghanistan could look like under the Taliban's rule and managed to negotiate rare access to an area just west of Kabul, controlled by the extremist group. More than 50% of the country is now controlled or contested by the Taliban, with over 70 districts fully held by the group, and that number is only growing. This is Wardak province, a strategic area in central Afghanistan that is the gateway to the country's capital. And we're driving along a dangerous stretch of roadway called Highway 1, which connects Kabul to Kandahar, the birthplace of the Taliban. We're just crossing from the government-controlled side of Kabul into Taliban-controlled territory. And the farmers and the factories that are here, all their taxes are paid to the Taliban as well. We're in a very small local car so that people don't notice us. For our safety, we smuggled ourselves deep inside the region by dressing like locals. I've been told to wear a traditional Afghan burqa, a religious covering the Taliban requires women to wear outside the home. Look, this is huge. Every few meters, there's a massive crater where there's been an attack or a road bomb. It kind of gives you an impression of just how much fighting there has been here. Here's one, here's a crater. There's another one. From here on out, we were reliant on a small group of fighters to guide us on the tour. No contact with our security team in Kabul was permitted while we were there. Once we entered the village, I was told I could remove the burqa and put on the hijab. This village that we're in now is a stronghold of the Taliban in the area and is one of the most important places in this province. It's from here that a lot of the communication and the coordination takes place for Taliban movement. Okay, we're about to meet some Taliban fighters who are still actively engaged in battle with Afghan forces. You can hear his Quranic verses playing in the background. They've come with their ammunition, and I can see one of them also holding an RPG. Assalamu alaikum. My name's Hind. Nice to meet you. Shall we go and sit? I definitely wore the wrong shoes for this. Last year, the US and the Taliban struck a historic peace deal. But according to Commander Hamas, who leads a unit of about 20 fighters, the war between the Taliban and the Afghan government is far from over. Now you're in a situation where the American troops are leaving and you have a peace deal with the Americans, so why are you still fighting?
د پلاس جوړ شوی نظام په افغانستان کې اوس چلیږي نو هغه هیڅ کله د منلو وړ نه دی او نه موږ منلی شو ځکه
So you'll never accept a democracy?
هغه اصول چې د اسلام سره ډېر په ټکر کې نه وي چې د انسان لپاره مضر نه وي د مسلمانانو لپاره مضر نه وي دیموکراسي دی داسې یو شی غواړي لکه دی چې اوس غرب چیغې وي چې دا د ښځو حقوق د ښځو حقوق دی دوی ته وي چې ښځه ازاده وګرځي په ازاده ټولنه کې خو اسلام دا حقوق ښځې ته چې ورکړي دي په داسې شکل نه دی ورکړي لکه کوم حکومت چې غواړي یا لکه کوم غربیان چې موږ غواړي تحمیل یې کړه د حقوق د ښځو دی دیموکراسي اصلا دا معنی چې د اسلام مسلمان انسان چې دی حر دی آزاد پیدا شوی دی کنه خو هغه د اسلامي شریعت په چوکاټ کې باید هغه قوانین جاری شي نه داسې چې د اسلام سره د قرآن سره په ټکر کې وي کنه.
How can you say that under the Taliban women are given their rights under Islamic law when it's a known fact that the Taliban stopped girls from going to school and they stopped women from working even in hospitals where they're needed? Is that Islamic law?
هغه د اسلامي شریعت په چوکاټ کې موږ قوانین غواړو کوم قوانین چې نن دلته په موږ تحمیلیږي هغه قوانینو باندې د موږ زنانه د موږ خورانې د موږ میندې د موږ لورانې نشي تللی مدرسو ته مکتبو ته موږ هیڅ کله د ښځو د حقوقو یا د ښځو د درس او د تعلیم مانع نه یو.
What do you say to the tens of thousands of women in Afghanistan who are afraid of the Taliban returning into government?
اصلا کوم څوک په افغانستان کې اوس یو مسلمان وي هغه که نر وي که ښځه وي هغه خو د بلکل د اسلامي نظام نه ویره نه لري ځکه اسلامي نظام داسې یو نظام دی چې هغه د امن او د صلح او د خوشحالۍ نظام دی. هیڅ داسې پیښه نشته چې په اسلامي نظام کې د یا ښځه په دې وډار شي چې ما حقوق ضایع کېږي یا د نر په دې وډار شي. انشاءالله د ټولو حقوق به بالکل خوندي وي داسې په امن کې.
The Taliban claims it's not the same brutal group that it once was when it first ruled Afghanistan in the 1990s. But videos posted to social media over the last few years tell a very different story. In areas under Taliban rule, the group controls society using extreme interpretations of Islamic Sharia law. The Taliban punishes thieves by cutting off hands, publicly flogging people for committing crimes, and stoning to death those who are found guilty of adultery. It's this form of governance the Taliban is battling the Afghan government to install across the country. Upon arriving in the Tangi Valley, we were escorted to a safe house where fighters were planning an attack on government forces about a kilometre away on the main road.
تانگ بیشتره ماده تانگ بیشتره اونجا فکر کنم خدا هم زخمی ده زخمی تو ما یا زخمی ده آن پی نده تانگ بیشتره.
Roadside attacks are near constant here. You can hear the sounds of gunfire and explosions even right next to town. That's a drone you can hear in the background. We've also been hearing airstrikes, machine guns going off, which shows that despite the peace deal, the war hasn't stopped. To see what it looks like for civilians living here, we were given a guided tour of the village bazaar, and our Taliban handlers were keen to show us that there's evidence of reform. Everyone has these, they're very popular. The sneakers are beloved by Taliban fighters everywhere. They're a status symbol, even as they've become synonymous with violence. Smoking cigarettes was once banned by the group, but some civilians smoke openly without fear of punishment. The Taliban was notorious for preventing girls from getting a formal education or attending schools past puberty. Now they say girls are free to attend schools and men are allowed to play some sports. While this might be what the Taliban wants the world to see, some aspects of life haven't changed. There are few women to be seen, access to information is limited, television and music are banned, and strict social codes are severely enforced. But the cornerstone of the Taliban movement and its political goals has always been the creation of an Islamic state based on a fundamentalist interpretation of Sharia law, a type of Islamic law enforced by ad hoc courts.
Assalamu alaikum.
There's little due process in these Sharia courts. Disputes here are settled by mobile justice and in some cases, Taliban commanders who have the autonomy to carry out punishments how they see fit. This hearing is being presided over by a 27-year-old Taliban commander who wields a tremendous amount of power over the community. He just smacked him. What you're seeing right now is pretty much a Taliban court. You have in front of me is a local Taliban commander talking to somebody who's been accused of stealing. I've just seen him smack him on the head. People have been coming in and out throughout this hearing. They're drinking teas. It's a very informal setting. Even though the Taliban's justice system may be medieval, the punishments might be medieval, it might be unfair, they might not have lawyers, at least there is a perception that justice is being served here, and that plays into the Taliban's hands. Surrounded by a group of Taliban fighters, the accused is forced to give a deposition to camera about whether he stole sheep from a local herder, as well as other crimes. He's been sitting in Taliban jail since his arrest, and has no representation at this hearing.
بدون د نور څومره غلې کړی ته
نه مې لیکلي
کتر باندې ثابته شوه
تر باندې ثابته شوه لاس مې باندې وسه
خو ته په دوه باندې منکر وې عریضه چا در باندې وکړه
د وری چک تندرای څلور ورځې باندې وم په بندیخانه کې
ښه کې د ورای په لاس ورکړو
ورای مې په لاس ورکړو
راز د چای په شوکو دی وری
آخی خور مې
ښه پاینده کې خود بیا څه غول نه خوري
نه داسې جاکو بیا نه وان داسې اشتباه بیا نه
صحیح شو کنه دو جزا یا د لاس غوڅول یا بازار کې په درو ویلي
This was only the initial hearing, and the commander tells us that his final punishment will be determined by a mobile judge who will travel to Wardok to deliver the sentencing. Either a lashing in the public square or his hand will be cut off. It may seem brutal, but this kind of swift justice does have some level of support among civilians because it's seen as less corrupt than the Afghan government's judicial system.
دغلته نظامی مسؤلیت تمانا چې د یو مترکي عمومي مسؤلیت کله موږ په یو جرم باندې خبر شو کله چې غل پیدا کو غل په چا باندې شک و یا یقین ته کې ورسېدلو دغه بیا د خپل خپل معلومات خلو چې دای په خپل خپل باندې د اقرار وکړو په زور او په جبر باندې نه ورسته د دغه د خپل خپل اقرار خلو بیا محاکم باندې موږ تاسو دغه سی وشرا ده موږ خپل د امارات محاکم داسې څونه پر علما د چې یو قاضي صاحب د مفتی صاحب د یو بل اداري د غسر ناستي هغه بیا د کتاب نه هغه اصولي او شرعي فیصله خلې چې شی په دوه جزا لیکل شي په قران او په کتاب کې او ورته لیکل شي هغه فیصله خبرته په دوه باندې تطبیق کیو
In terms of the cases that you've dealt with today, what are the potential punishments that they could be served in the end?
اوس داسې د غټ غلو د پوره مثلا د لاس وڅول شته کې کنه د غټ غلو د پوره او د غوځو کوم چې دا وس په جرم کې دای راشي چې شی چې په شریعت کې تشته چې په قرآن کې د غلط مو تطبیق کیو
The man that was sat in front of you that was accused of stealing, potentially at the end of the court case he might have his hand cut off.
غلطه د خپل اصول او طرز العمل شته نو ان شاء الله خود شته ورنه فقط قرآن او شریعت تطبیقي خلاص
Human rights organizations would look at this scene and see men who don't have representatives, who don't have anybody putting forward their case, who have people who don't necessarily have the judicial or legal experience to be able to be handing out punishments, deciding the fate of an individual. And they would say that that isn't justice. What would you say to them?
یو دا سوال احمقانه دی موږ هر زده کړه موږ هر عمل موږ هر کردار د موافق او مطابق د قرآن او د شریعت دی اضافه نور هیڅ شی نشته کې
So is this the justice system that you would like to see implemented in Kabul and across Afghanistan?
نو دا خو عملی دی په دوه کې شک نشته هغه ساحې چې د امارات کنټرول لاندې دي اسلامي امارات کنټرول لاندې په هغو کې په قطعا دغه د قرآن او د شریعت غږ دی او همدغه عملي کول نور هیڅ شی نشته کې
Would you consider bringing back stoning if you were to be in government? Is that something that you would do for adultery?
دغه زنا لپاره بالکل جزا شته اک سنگسار و کومه جزا چې په شریعت کې ورته مطابق دغه حال سبب قتل کیږي دغه د سن سبب قتل کیږي دغه د بخش دي کې ټول کې ذکر دي کوم شای چې په قرآن او په شریعت کې ورته کومه جزا و هغه جزا مطابق د جزا سره دا غشته دی
We were unable to speak with the defendant, but the Taliban took us to meet his accuser. Ruhullah's only a teenager and has lived under the Taliban for his entire life. And while he was willing to speak with us, the Taliban made sure to listen in on our conversation. When a crime is carried out in this village, do you have confidence that there will be some form of justice?
Oh, the Taliban del kabi istikhbarat nisi der zar.
How do you know that the man who's been arrested for stealing your sheep definitely did it?
Zaka Taliban ta ikrar kara de really chmoda sine.
Did you see with your own eyes the person who stole the sheep?
Na mona didi. Taliban paida kivi almiwi kana nevina.
Are you concerned that it might not be a fair trial?
واضح لا نادك عادل كا
The interview was abruptly stopped by our handlers, who were growing increasingly uncomfortable with our presence and preferred we see evidence of their military achievements They brought us to a sprawling grave site overlooking the Tangi Valley. The white flags mark the Taliban fighters who died in battle.
خدای دې په ورحمېږي یا الله ملت چې پیدا ورسې ور بنصیب کړي خدای دې مغفرت ورته وکړي خدای دې اواز ورکړي دا پکې خوشحاله وي یا الله دې برکت موږ باندې واچوي.
The Taliban says this is the gravesite of a fighter who single-handedly downed a US Chinook helicopter with a rocket-propelled grenade in 2011. The attack was the deadliest day for American forces in the Afghanistan war. 30 Americans were killed, including members of SEAL Team 6, who 3 months earlier were involved in the raid that killed Osama bin Laden. Over the last 20 years of war, more than 2,300 Americans have been killed in battle, while an estimated 170,000 Afghans have died. Now that the Taliban is closer than ever to regaining power, continued bloodshed is no obstacle to their resolve. They've escalated their attacks against the Afghan government and were eager to show us the guerrilla tactics that have served them well in the past. What is this?
دا باروت موږ خپل مواد دي دا بس ما جوړو بام جوړو دا ډېر ما کوي مواد دي چې تل په جوړو کړه خلک ټول سخت کوي ګنګس کیم لکوي.
So the Taliban and the United States have an agreement right now. If that's the case, why are you making explosives?
نو موږ هغه حکم خلاصیک ته په دوی کې خوشاک نشته خو هغه نو ورسته دغه چې کوم افغان حکومت ای دلته د شپانی یو دغه عمله هغه تر اوسه پورې دغه سم موافقه ته نه درسیدلی نو دغه په خاطر چې دغه سم موافقه ته ونه رسی دغه جنگ دوام لري ان شاء الله خو مخه به نور کارونه هم لري.
When was the last time you planted one of these?
درې چالر سپیکي دوه درې 14 تنو د موږ دغه نه ان شاء الله.
Who was it targeting?
افغان دولت باندې په مقام کې بم کې جوړ کلم کې خلا مستندی فراغل دتنم پټاو ور کلم هغه ته اسمون ته پورته کړ کا برق ته ماده شول چې برق ورکه کې کله کاتور شغه ته موږ مېمنه کیدو چې بم جوړ کړ د افغان دولت په دې دم کارواله دې په لار کې مرسیره.
What would make you put all of these guns down? What would make you stop fighting?
موږ د مشرانو امر ته په انتظار کله چې د موږ ته وی چې نور په افغانستان کې اسلامي نظام د حاکمیدو په حالت کې دی موږ بالکل آماده دي ته چې وسلې کېدو خپل اسلامي نظام کې خدمت وکړو خپل درسونه یو خپل اقتصاد جوړ کو خپل فامیل سره خوشاله ژوند وکړو موږ جګړه تحمیل شوې ده نو همیشه موږ جنگ نه غواړو چې موږ ملک آزاد شي اسلامي نظام موږ ولرو موږ خوشاله شو په آرام ژوند وکړو خدای موږ بریا ده بالکل موږ بریا ده موږ فاتحانه توګه کابل ته ان شاء الله ننوځو.